Today we will take a look at a story that happened in 2022. This case involved several countries, and the sentence was handed down less than a month ago. What started as a fairy tale ended as a horror film. Ekaterina Baumann was born on May 13, 1989, in Leningrad. It is one of the largest cities in Russia, which was then renamed to St. Petersburg. The sequence of events that ended in something horrific began in Turkey in 2009, where the 20-year-old Ekaterina traveled on vacation with her family. It is here that she met a German citizen, Walter Baumann, who was 13 years older than her. Walter was fluent in Russian as he was born in Kazakhstan, a country that, like Russia, was a part of the USSR until 1991. Walter got his education in Germany and earned good money, but his personal life wasn't going as well. He was in constant search and dreamed of meeting the perfect woman, but he himself didn't meet the criteria of a perfect man. He lived with his parents, didn't take care of his appearance, dressed untidily, and looked repulsive overall. He often met women through the internet, and almost all of them were Russian. He chatted with one of them for a long time and decided to visit Russia to see her in real life. But when she met Walter in person, he did not make a good impression on her, and she no longer wanted to keep in touch with him. That's why, when he had a holiday romance in Turkey, his friends couldn't believe their eyes. Ekaterina was young and beautiful. She must have had many admirers, but for some reason she chose Walter. This romantic love story started out like many similar love tales when two lonely hearts felt each other's attraction. After Ekaterina returned to Russia and Walter returned to Germany, they continued to chat through social media and long phone calls. He told his friends about how good and how beautiful she is, about how they talk on the phone for hours and write poetry to each other. Then he would occasionally visit her in St. Petersburg, spending a lot of money on these travels. At that time, Ekaterina was in her second year of studying at a university in St. Petersburg. Walter was serious with his intentions, and so he assisted in her transition to Hamburg University. This way, Ekaterina left Russia and moved to Germany in 2010, in the port city of Bremerhaven, located on the shore of the North Sea. People characterized Ekaterina as a smart, attractive, and cheerful young woman. After moving, she kept in constant contact with her family in Russia. In Germany, she continued to study business administration, which she started back in Russia. She loved to run and practice yoga, and she always looked for quiet places. A few months later, the lovers got married. Walter's friend Alexander described their wedding ceremony as follows. They had a luxurious wedding. I used to be a wedding photographer, so I've seen a lot, but Ekaterina was the most beautiful and happy bride I have ever seen. The celebration cost them a lot of money for sure. The registration took place at a lighthouse from where they took off on a huge white horse-drawn carriage. No one has ever seen something like this in Germany. Yet there were very few guests, which seemed a bit strange. The wedding ended long before dawn, says Alexander. Their wedding photo captures a happy image. Walter looks like a man who supports his young wife, while Ekaterina hugs him gently and smiles blissfully. It looked like two people who are a perfect match have finally found each other. The couple stepped into a happy family life, and their story seemed like a fairy tale. Except instead of a luxurious castle, the newlyweds moved into Walter's parents' home, and this is the moment Ekaterina had her first problem since moving to Germany. Living together with Walter's parents proved not to be easy. The fairy tale started to fall apart. Walter's mother was a very hard woman. She will play a major, if not the main role in how this story ends, so that's why it's better to give her a brief introduction. Lyudmila Baumann spent the first 38 years of her life in Kazakhstan. She was an excellent student. At first, she became an assistant chemist technologist, then a chemical engineer, and then a middle school teacher. She got married at 18 and gave birth to a son who was her only child, and maybe that's why he was the most important person in her life. The Baumann family had German roots, and that's why they emigrated from Kazakhstan to Germany. Bremerhaven became their new home. Lyudmila worked at a marine institute, researching the problem of global warming for a long time. She held a good position there, often went out to sea, and participated in about 25 expeditions, including ones in Antarctica. Her migration history was a model for many emigrants in Germany, and that's why her 1-meter-long portrait hangs along another 30 portraits on the facade of the Emigration Center in Bremerhaven. But Ludmila couldn't accept the fact that her son Walter was no longer a small boy, but a fully grown man in his 30s. When he wasn't around, she would call him every hour, asking when he would return, where he was, and with whom. As he was her only child, she lacked a healthy distance from him. Ekaterina has also encountered prejudice from Ludmila, but still tried to please her husband's mother in every way. Ludmila constantly interfered in her son's marriage and critiqued Ekaterina. She blamed her for being a bad housewife. Ekaterina tried to combat this kind of attitude, but her attempts were never successful. When she went out, she turned into a gray mouse. Otherwise, she had to hear from her mother-in-law how she is dressing like a prostitute. Walter worked in a port, where he earned around 4,000 euros a month. He was always at work, on all weekends and holidays, because it paid more. He wasn't a workaholic, but rather greedy. He saved most of the money he earned and had good savings, which he didn't want to spend. In 2017, when Ekaterina got pregnant, Walter decided to spend a small part of his savings. He bought a house where they moved from his parents. The house search took a long time, as it was important for Walter to spend as little money as possible. Ekaterina was hoping that the move would be a good influence on their relationship, but it wasn't. Ludmila was a constant guest in their house and continued to interfere in all spheres of her son's life. Around the same time, Ekaterina gave birth to her daughter, and the relationship between spouses became even more strained. After the birth of the daughter, Walter became more strict and controlling of his wife. He talked down to her and prohibited her from learning to drive a car, as well as didn't allow her to talk with her daughter in German, as he wanted her to only know one language, Russian. Ekaterina did not understand what these changes in her husband's behavior were related to. He became even more resentful, jealous, and controlling than before. It was getting harder to predict the changes in his behavior. He could lose his temper over any small, insignificant things. The strain in the couple's relationship grew, and Walter went so far as to use his physical superiority against his wife and start beating her. In the end of 2019, authorities first learned about the Baumann family because of the issue of domestic violence, but the case was quickly closed when the couple told the social worker that they had reconciled. But Ekaterina and her husband continued to berate each other, cursing at each other, sometimes even in front of their baby. Walter secretly took photos and videos of Ekaterina, recording their arguments on the phone. Walter asked a computer guy from his circle of acquaintances to hack his wife's phone, but he refused. Walter accused his wife of being a bad mother and mentally unstable. Ekaterina, in turn, accused Walter of having lost interest in her, working too much, and being burned out because of it. She couldn't live in constant stress and fear anymore and turned to a support center for victims of domestic violence. The first time she reached out for help was in the fall of 2020. After the wife and daughter left, Walter did everything in his power to get them back. He promised that he would change, said he realized that he behaved in the wrong way, and told Ekaterina that he couldn't live without her and their daughter. As a result, Ekaterina forgave him and returned to their home with their daughter. But there was no less fighting between spouses. Every time Walter realized that he had wronged his wife, he gave her gifts or arranged a family trip. The man changed his attitude not only towards his wife, but towards the child as well. Walter's attitude towards his daughter can only be characterized as total control. When he was at home, he wanted the daughter to always be in his sight. If they went somewhere, he wouldn't let her out of his arms, although she was 3 years old at that point. He cut his work time at the port in half to have the ability to spend more time with his daughter. He would take his girl to kindergarten and pick her up in the evening. He cooked for her, and during the night she slept in the parents' room. Those who knew Walter well described him as a strategist prone to dramatization. He was good at manipulating people and was stingy. Money was one of the main life purposes for him. He often seemed nervous and impatient. After Ekaterina became a mother, She visited her family in Russia several times, and each time she was accompanied by Walter. He feared that the wife would return to Russia and deprive him of the opportunity to be around his daughter. Ekaterina started thinking about divorce as she saw how the husband's attitude was becoming more and more abusive. At the same time, she discovered that all her documents had disappeared. As it will turn out later, Walter took all his wife's papers to his mother's house and left them there. One time, when Walter's mother was visiting them, the spouses had yet another argument, and Ekaterina was kicked out of the house. She got thrown out like some useless item. She went to the police, and the situation was resolved. One time, Ekaterina and Walter had such a heated quarrel right before their kindergarten that Youth Support Services received a notification from administration regarding the family. The quarreling couple started receiving child education support. For 6 weeks, a family crisis counselor was to accompany the family and monitor the child's well-being. The counselor's verdict was, "It is too dangerous for the child to be left with her parents." The only reason Ekaterina still lived with her husband was because of her daughter, but she couldn't return to Russia with her. For her daughter to leave Germany, Ekaterina must have received Walter's consent, indicating that he is not against his child leaving the country. In August of 2021, Ekaterina took the daughter for the second time and turned to a women's crisis center, telling the administration that her husband wanted to take her life. Social services wanted to give a 5-year-old girl to an orphanage, and the psychologist of the Youth Affairs Department described the situation as very severe. Ekaterina agreed to the Youth Affairs Service taking her daughter into foster care, but Walter and his mother spoke against it. That's why both parents had to take care of the child. For a few days, the girl lived with her father, and for the next few days, she lived in a women's shelter together with her mother, always alternating and with the condition that the couple's daughter must attend kindergarten to learn German. In a few weeks, the family reunited again. Some Russian sources state that in the women's shelter, Ekaterina had bad roommates, and that kindergarten, which the daughter must have been visiting, was too far away. As a result, she returned home, but now the spouses have started the divorce process and lived in separate rooms. Ekaterina's desire to return to Russia was growing. Walter wasn't against it, but only on the condition that his daughter stay with him in Germany. That's why Ekaterina visited St. Petersburg at the turn of 2021 and 2022 alone. In Russia, she had a date with a man she met on the internet. He was from the Siberian city of Omsk and was a pilot. Ekaterina returned to Germany in mid-January 2022 and continued to chat with the Russian pilot on a daily basis. They sent each other many love messages, but a few weeks after returning to Germany, namely on February 4th, 2022, the 32-year-old woman stopped contacting her family and her new lover. An empty suitcase and 13,000 euros from the husband's stash are all Ekaterina took with her when she ran away once again. She left her phone, keys, clothes, and most importantly, her 5-year-old daughter. This is the version Walter told the police on the 6th of February, 2022, when Ekaterina's parents couldn't reach her for 2 days and reached out to German police with a request to conduct a welfare check. "We found out about her disappearance in a strange way. I couldn't get her on the phone for a few days, as for Walter. Then he picked her up and said that he hadn't seen her since the 5th of February. He also said that she doesn't respond because she doesn't have money on her balance," said Svetlana, Ekaterina's mother, to journalists. The entire city went to search for Ekaterina. People searched every square meter, put up flyers, and analyzed every version of what happened. One of the few people who didn't care about Ekaterina's disappearance was Walter. While concerned people put up flyers all around the city, the man was busy with renovating his house. They assumed the worst immediately after the disappearance of the woman, and her husband was the center of attention. The police searched the house of the Baumann family only 4 days after Ekaterina supposedly ran away from it. By this time, Walter was finished with renovations. He painted the floors in the guest room and replaced a couch. He was also seen purchasing a large quantity of cleansers in the local store. The police discovered that the surveillance footage from the video cameras in the house had magically disappeared. officers searched the house for 3 hours for any evidence of the crime. They led a detection dog through the garage and the house itself. In the garage, the dog became slightly agitated but didn't give a corresponding signal. The first tests, conducted by criminalists, didn't reveal any evidence within the house or the garage. In the littered car, the police found a knife and an electric shocker, which were seized as potential evidence. Officers noticed that Walter was not concerned about his wife, who went missing in the slightest. Instead, he was interested in whether he would get sole guardianship over his 5-year-old daughter if his wife didn't return. The search for Ekaterina went on day after day, but nothing was found. It's like she vanished. Officers understood that the probability of a young mother running away and leaving her daughter, documents, and phone behind in a foreign country is extremely low. Walter had the police's suspicion, as well as his statement that Ekaterina ran away, taking an empty suitcase with her. The mysterious disappearance of Ekaterina worried people in the city and far beyond it. Women who didn't even know Ekaterina organized a search. "We will continue looking for her until we find out what happened," said one of the organizers. 2 weeks after the disappearance of the young mother, about 400 volunteers all around North Germany searched for her in Bremerhaven with the help of rescue dogs several times. This incident caused a huge reaction on social media. Ekaterina's family attracted attention to her disappearance in Russia, and this story was shown on the main Russian channels. "My daughter was with this man for 12 years, but for a year and a half, their marriage consisted solely of quarrels, and he hit her many times," said Ekaterina's mother to journalists. "He kept my daughter in isolation. He took away her IDs and bank cards. He didn't allow her to meet anyone." On March 1, 2022, 25 days after the disappearance of Ekaterina, horrific news spread, first in Bremerhaven, then all around the country, and later in Russia. An ordinary passerby saw a weird suitcase that washed ashore during his walk along the local river, Weser. He was horrified when he opened it. Inside were fragments of a woman's body, which had been packed in garbage bags. It is important to note that not all fragments were inside the suitcase. Some of them were missing. Sadly, the victim turned out to be 32-year-old Ekaterina Baumann. By a strange coincidence, the suitcase was found near the lighthouse, where she got married. The fact that the suitcase washed ashore was a stroke of luck for the investigation. According to experts, it could have swum to the North Sea, and then Ekaterina would remain missing forever. This is how hopes for a happy ending to the mysterious disappearance of her relatives crumbled. Now they could only say goodbye to their beloved daughter, mother, and friend. The city residents organized a small improvised memorial. There, local residents, who not indifferent to what happened, left flowers, lit candles, and even wrote letters. Walter Baumann was arrested as the main and only suspect. After discovering the body, the family house was searched for the second time. This time, experts were busy for several days. The police found a bottle with a strong sedative, which was found in Ekaterina's blood. The police also found single-use gloves, foil, and adhesive tapes, as well as large quantities of garbage bags and cleansers. Moreover, canisters with acetic acid, solvents and bleach, suitcase keys, and the pink scarf that was on Ekaterina's neck on her last selfie were found in the garage and the shed. Investigators also noticed that there were barely any of Ekaterina's personal items. The majority of her clothes were thrown out, and her wedding photo, a reminder of happy moments, was hidden behind the piano. The police have also found the white jacket that was on Ekaterina in her last selfie. The jacket was found in a trash container at the workplace of Ludmila Baumann, Walter's mother. While in custody, the man often wrote letters to his mother in which he confessed his love for her and called her "my son." There were urgent appeals in the letters such as, "Help us all, mother, save us. You can do it. You are my only hope for the future," and "Please save me." What he meant by this became clear only 8 months later. Friday, February 4th, 2022, was the last day of Ekaterina's life. At 4:30 p.m., she went for a 10-minute walk in her light-colored jacket and yellow skirt. Neighbors' video cameras recorded it. In the evening, the family had dinner. There was tuna, halibut, mashed potatoes, and olives, as well as a bottle of wine. In Walter's words, Ekaterina drank only one glass and he drank the rest. That's why he went to sleep at 8 in the evening. According to the court documents, Ekaterina's phone was connected to the network for the last time at 7:41 p.m. At 8:25 p.m., she made a video call to her new lover from her computer. She was in a good mood and said that she would call him again as soon as she put her child to bed. But she didn't call him that evening. She didn't call anyone. 2 hours later, the Russian pilot sent a message wishing her a good night, but his message remained unread. A forensic examination showed that Ekaterina was dead 2 hours after the dinner. This was confirmed by the analysis of her stomach contents. Forensic experts found traces of strong sedatives and alcohol in her blood. The hyoid bone was broken, and so the cause of death was determined to be strangulation. Everything else that was done with the body, according to experts, was done using very sharp tools. The next morning, Walter briefly opened his car at 7:22 a.m. At 10:20 a.m., the car drove off and returned at 4:49 p.m. 3 days later, Walter called his wife's phone, probably to confirm his legend that she had run away. He also sent her a few messages, asking the most obvious question, "Where are you, Ekaterina?" Before Ekaterina's disappearance, Walter and his mother chatted intensely through WhatsApp daily, but after February 4th, there was silence between them, which is totally uncharacteristic. In the middle of February, Walter drove his car to auto service, where he told an employee that the car's interior needed to be cleaned very thoroughly, from top to bottom. On August 26, 2022, a trial began. The prosecutor argued that Walter slipped sedatives into his wife's drink, and then, when she fell asleep, he strangled her. Walter prepared in advance what he was going to do with her body. The prosecutor's office cited the husband's fear of losing guardianship of his daughter in the event of divorce, as well as financial losses as a motive. It was also made public that traces of blood were found in the garage, which Ekaterina's husband wanted to clean according to advice from the internet. They were under the shelf, on the floor, on the stairs, and in the seams. Traces of blood were also found on the carpet in the trunk of his car, despite thorough cleaning. Experts from the Institute of Forensic Medicine proved that it was Ekaterina's blood in all the places mentioned above. Walter's phone and computer were seized by the police, and they provided answers to many questions. Not long before the tragedy, he made the following search queries: how to avoid punishment for taking a person's life, which acid dissolves meat, how many liters of acid are needed to fill a bathtub, how to read other people's WhatsApp chats, how long does it take to die from sedatives, can you be convicted without evidence in Germany? In the period from December 2021 to the end of February 2022, he made around 500 search queries. Everything pointed to the fact that Walter planned this crime. On the day of his wife's disappearance, he Googled electric shocker twice. Forensic experts found traces of electrocution on Ekaterina's body. Investigators think that Walter was using a shocker to check if his wife was still alive. In court, Walter wore his wedding ring and stated that he is a widower. For 2 long months, he was silent and didn't make any comments on the charges brought against him. Sometimes, when the witnesses were giving their testimonies, he would plug his ears, as if it had nothing to do with him. The most emotions he showed was when he saw his mother in the courtroom. He cried when she was questioned as a witness. He stared at her with his hands folded as if in prayer. "Get me out of here," he begged his mother in a letter. And it seems like the woman agreed to help her son. During her testimony, Ludmila Baumann stated that it was she who took Ekaterina's life. "It was me, not my son," she said. Here's what she said to the astonished court. She came to the son's and her daughter-in-law's house in the middle of the night because her son called and asked her to care for the granddaughter. When she arrived, she saw Ekaterina on the couch, who was deep asleep. In the words of Ludmila, she wanted to wake her up and started to shake her. Ekaterina woke up and hit her in the face. They started a fight, in the course of which, according to Ludmila, she choked her son's wife. She also said that it was she who performed the following actions with Ekaterina's body. She said, "I loved Ekaterina as a daughter. I didn't want this." But was it Ludmila who committed the crime? It is possible that her love for her son was so immense that she decided to take the blame for him. As I already said, mother and son were extremely close and talked on the phone quite often. The entire WhatsApp chat between mother and son took up 1,699 pages of investigation files. Despite the self-incrimination, Ludmila left the courtroom as a free citizen on that and all the other days of the trial. The jury and the prosecutor's office didn't believe the woman's statement and assumed that she only wanted to protect her son. Even experienced attorneys were stunned by the mother's self-incrimination. The attorney of a 66-year-old woman demanded her arrest, and her son's defenders demanded Walter's release. But it didn't come to this. The mother was left free, and her son remained in jail. But she wasn't about to give up. Ludmila wrote a letter to the court in which she described what she did with the body in detail. She once again stated, "My son did not do this." She wanted to be questioned again and charged, but the court did not grant her wish and didn't believe her once again. Ludmila managed to prove that she took part in the crime. As I mentioned, not all fragments were found in the suitcase. Ekaterina Baumann showed where to look for the missing fragment, which didn't fit in the suitcase. The provided information turned out to be true, and the police did find another bag, which was weighed down so that it didn't float. The bag was found in the exact place Ludmila pointed to. Pedometer on Ludmila's phone has also shown that at the night of the murder, at roughly 0:40 a.m., she walked 220 yards. Neighbors' video cameras near Walter's and Ekaterina's house recorded a person passing by. The phone of Walter's father also showed activity at that time. He drove Ludmila to the son's house, although he told investigators that he was asleep at that time. Experts established that by this time Ekaterina was already dead, which means that the 66-year-old woman was giving false testimony. And then there's this strange detail. Ekaterina Baumann came to the son's house when Ekaterina was already dead, and she was there during further actions regarding the body. Even if she didn't participate in the process, she helped clean the house. Basically, she helped her son cover up the evidence of the crime and was an accomplice. But apparently, the corresponding laws work differently in Germany. Ludmila wasn't arrested or charged with anything. This seems strange, doesn't it? Please write what you think about this in the comments. The closer the day of the verdict was, the more desperate the mother became in her attempts to save her son. She wrote the judge another letter, in which she once again stated that she committed the crime and not Walter. Now the letter said, "I hated Ekaterina but couldn't tell my son about it. He was fighting for the love of his wife, and I was afraid that she would want to take his life. That's why I decided to get rid of Ekaterina by making it look as if she poisoned herself because of her tragic love for a Russian pilot." In her words, she printed a goodbye letter in Ekaterina's name and was going to put it next to her when she died. She spiked the juice with various drugs and gave this juice to her son, not telling him what it was, but asking him to give it to his wife during dinner. Ludmila stated that she came to the son's house to leave a farewell note, written in the name Ekaterina, but she woke up and Ludmila had to strangle her. But the court didn't believe the woman's confession, as everything pointed to the fact that the crime was committed by her son. Walter was silent throughout the entire process, and on one of the last hearings, he recited his notes on 230 sheets of paper about his years in Kazakhstan, his life, and his love. The main message of his statement was, "I always loved Ekaterina and our daughter, but her emotional burnout and psychological problems led to many quarrels." 230 sheets of paper, yet he only briefly touched on the night that changed everything. He stated that he was asleep when his mother took the life of his wife and dragged her into the garage. Walter blamed his mother for this horrible crime and said, "She betrayed me, used me, and threw me into prison." When addressing the judge, he also said, "My daughter lost her mother. She must not lose her father too." The creepiest thing in this story is not even the details of this terrifying crime, but the fact that all of this happened right before the eyes of the 5-year-old daughter of the couple. Currently, the Russian grandmother is prohibited from talking with her granddaughter, which is thought to be given to a German foster family. Walter was at home together with his daughter. It all happened in front of the child. He created a psychotraumatic situation for the girl. She often mumbles something, pointing to her head and forearms. She saw everything, says Ekaterina's mother, Svetlana. Currently, the girl is living in a facility for traumatized children and is given a new name so that she doesn't find out the story of her real family. Svetlana is trying to receive guardianship for her granddaughter, but the German authorities do not allow her to even talk with her on the phone. On May 23, 2023, when the verdict was announced, Ekaterina's daughter was 6. Walter Baumann was given a life sentence. German law is such that after 15 years, he will be eligible to parole. The urn with Ekaterina's ashes was buried in her hometown of St. Petersburg. The case of Ludmila Baumann is still open. It is possible that the prosecutor's office will charge her as an accomplice, but so far this has not happened.